Distinguished participants, ladies and gentlemen, I am very pleased to take part in this symposium on behalf of the Club de Madrid and wish to thank the organizer for their kind invitation. I'm delighted to share the podium with a group of distinguished participants, but at the same time, I'm very sorry that I'm not able to take part in the final discussion due to the time difference between the Netherlands and Korea. Before I start on a very serious topic on SDGs and ESG, let me say a few episodes on my experience as the Special Envoy of the UN Secretary General for Climate Change. I was appointed as the Special Envoy together with Gro Harlem Brundtland, former Prime Minister of Norway, and Ricardo Lagos, former President of Chile, in 2007. That was the year when the COP13 was to be held in Bali, Indonesia in November. Our mission was to make the COP13 a success. Therefore, three of us was assigned to the region we are from, Brundtland to Europe, Lagos to Americas, and I to Asia and the Pacific. Each of us traveled extensively to solicit the support from the leaders and encourage them to take active part in making the success of the COP13. We were even invited by the US Congress to testify. At the time, as it is now, US Congress was completely divided along the political lines. Democrats in favor of action to tackle climate change, whereas Republicans were against it. Although we were actively participated in the hearing, we were not able to persuade any single Republican representative to cross the bench. The chief delegates from the government to the Conference of the Parties, COP, have always been the ministers in charge of environmental issues. However, as the climate change action requires budgets and financial resource mobilizations, ministers responsible for finance play a critical role in mainstreaming climate change in national budget and implementing policy actions. Therefore, I suggested to hold finance ministers meeting at the time of COP13 in addition to that of the environment ministers. We succeeded in persuading the government to have the meeting of the finance ministers in Bali at the time of COP13 for the very first time. Ever since the COP13, unfortunately, there have been no finance ministers meeting held during the COP. The COP13 in Bali was one of the most successful conferences. At the meeting, Kevin Rudd, who was just elected as the Prime Minister of Australia, delivered a speech that Australia would ratify the Kyoto Protocol, and he received a standing ovation from the world community at the time. I was also heavily involved in promoting the UN Global Compact principles and initiatives in Korea. Korea started from almost none in the early 2000s, but grew into one of the top 10 best performing networks in the Global Compact, whose network exceeded 285 by the year 2015. The UN Global Compact, started in 2000, was soon followed by the Principles for Responsible Investment, PRI, in 2005. The PRI began to work on the sustainable global financial system and encouraged the adoption of the principles by fostering good governance, integrity, and accountability. United Nations Environment Programme Finance Initiative, UNEP-FI, is a good example of a unique partnership between UNEP and the global financial sector. I am of the view that, broadly speaking, the MDGs was a precursor to the SDGs, and so were the UN Global Compact and UNEP-PRI to ESG. Ladies and gentlemen, Sustainable Global Goals, Development Goals, SDG, was set up by the United Nations General Assembly in September 2015. Since then, many companies have incorporated the SDGs into their corporate mission and strategies. A business leader has to manage a transformational change and to develop a systematic view of change. But we all know that since a gap always exists between intention and realization, what is more important is to implement a strategy than to establish a sustainable strategy. The private sector's own interpretation of SDGs could be explained by the environmental, social, and corporate governance, ESG for short. The PRI, Principles for Responsible Investment, is a framework developed by and for investors to improve the analysis of ESG issues in the investment process for social impact investment of a company. Let me give a case in Korea. The ESG framework has been already incorporated into the main investment organizations like Korea Investment Corporation, KIC. KIC, founded in 2005 to increase national wealth and contribute to the growth of Korea's finance industry, manages assets entrusted by the Korean government, Bank of Korea, and public funds. KIC has established ESG approaches suitable for traditional and alternative assets, as well as direct and indirect investment, and is entrusted with the proceeds of the government's green and sustainability bond to invest in green and social projects. KIC examines and discloses the environmental and social impact of each investment, including reductions in greenhouse gases emissions, energy savings, renewable energy generation, and job creation. For the private sector, companies may search for relevant SDGs within the ESG framework, which align with their corporate goals and capacity. When a firm scrutinizes the possible cost, expected benefits, and potential external effects, it may also assess its intention realization gap and have a chance to develop better strategies. There are certain challenges to overcome when putting sustainability ideas into practice and achieving a systematic change to go beyond their usual businesses. Companies have internal and external pressures to achieve sustainability and at the same time to solve various challenges that may arise. The first challenge is that pace of management changeover is getting faster and faster. Progress on sustainability takes time and focus on companies' long-term growth. Although CEOs always emphasize the long-term vision, the decisions they make are often short-term based and more focused on present-day concerns. To overcome this short-termism, CEOs should broaden their horizons beyond finance to reflect the company's true value and vision. This will help them to set realistic targets aligned with the SDGs. The second challenge arises when there is no standard or set of rules for a company. Companies operating in different sectors experience different types of risks and crises, but are asked to incorporate sustainability strategies into their overall strategy. Since there are no standards, each company has no choice but to make judgments based on their own standards. Under these circumstances, it is difficult to know how well a company is heading towards accomplishing sustainable development goals. The third challenge is that it is necessary for a firm to define strategic and operational principles for sustainable business models and practices that will frame how strategy formulation and implementation processes can be linked to the SDGs. Strategic and operational questions for private organization would boil down to specific questions. How can strategic partnership with the other stakeholders help achieve the SDGs through ESG-related activities? The private organizations should answer such questions with the comprehensive framework and strategic principles of sustainable business. The last challenge is that stakeholders such as customers, shareholders, executives and employees, government and regional communities are increasingly expecting and demanding companies to promote SDGs across all business activities. Ladies and gentlemen, SK Group is an good example of a Korean company that has recognized early the importance of making a collective impact to address complex social needs. SK Group is keen to establish a system for measuring and compensating performance of social enterprises in our society and to activate an ecosystem of social enterprises through influx of investment and recruitment of outstanding competent personnel. Meanwhile, investment related to sustainable finance, such as issuance of green, social, and sustainable funds, have become increasingly prevalent, and investors are actively making responsible investment. For example, Korea's National Pension Service announced this year that it would invest 50% of its total assets in the aforementioned areas by 2022, emphasizing the importance of incorporating ESG and sustainable development issues in investment decision-making processes. The role of government to help the private sector to achieve SDG is to present the direction and targets in a large framework. This will facilitate and enable leading companies to successfully convert their sustainable vision to actual business practices. In a world with greater threat from climate change, the government should present a guideline of greenhouse gas reduction targets by sector in a larger framework. The government should also act as a guide on who should be responsible for how much and adjust the proportion of energy sources, for example, among new and renewable energies and nuclear power. Such regulations may pose a challenge and burden for unprepared companies, but prepared and flexible companies would be able to take an advantage of future market opportunities. Because both sustainability and global trends are so closely intertwined in general, there are numerous tangible benefits for the companies, such as lowering costs, controlling risks and responsibilities, improving quality, creating a healthy work environment, motivating employees, and increasing morale. Only what is measured can be managed, so it is important for companies to build a systematic framework for measurement and monitoring to get accurate information on which areas to improve. I would like to recommend the companies to engage locally in the application of international norms in policy discussions as a starting place for dialogue and to create collaboration platforms. Active capacity building and local ownership in decision-making will enable companies to realize an achievable standard for sustainable growth and to share information on value creation. Whether a company wants it or not, an increasing number of stakeholders are asking for a company's response and action to SDGs. In other words, there is a growing body of support for impact investment and ESG investment. With expanding support and endorsement from investors, companies should invest and execute its sustainable practices toward the process of transition to systematic and inclusive change with a commitment to leaving no one behind. Thank you for your attention.